Welcome back to my campaign of Gary Grigsby's War in the East 2. It is turn 5 and July 20th in the war. German forces have successfully captured the city of Peskov and Odessa. Odessa being mostly undefended. Having a target goal of turn 17, I think you could put the entire Russian army inside of there and still have it fall by turn 10. But I could be wrong on that. Maybe there's some way to do it, but I'm not figuring it out. So instead, let's recap the German offensive, starting with the city of Kiev. From my perspective, his strategy seems to be an attempt to stretch my lines out towards the southeast. In doing so, it's going to make me thin out the frontal assault that probably will come for Kiev. I'm obliged to do that. The only fear I have, like I said in the last episode, was if he has some counterflanking maneuver to the north of Kiev. I'm hoping that his forces around the Gomel region are there that's their goal. And as long as I can keep them pinned at Gomel, then Kiev's safe. For now, he pushes towards the Dnieper River. He does it in 2 columns, but fails to actually cross the river. In the south, with Odessa, his Romanian and Hungarian forces pressure the front lines of the southern front. The harshest combat comes at Smolensk, with a pincing maneuver surrounding several divisions. He's only able to progress about 20 miles. So there's still time for a lot more battles. In the north, other than taking the city of Peskov, it's mostly maneuvering. He pushes a lot more mostly tank divisions into his gap that he's formed in my lines. I still think he's going to push to sever the railroad between Moscow and Leningrad. But as my turn begins, this is a situation that I am facing. And for the most part, I'm relatively pleased. I am in better position than I was with the last several games that I've played. And I'm sure there'll be surprises in store for me, but I at least have some maneuverability. Losing 220,000 men on turn 5 doesn't scare me in any way. So we'll get to the air phase. So looking at the metric screen, and it's a trend I've been seeing from turn to turn, his air forces on map have kind of dwindled to stabilize at 1,700. In his theater boxes, they've risen all the way to 6,400. So I'm hoping there's an opportunity there. And the opportunity that I'm planning is a bombing strike on 3 railroad yards. The most important one being Minsk. And yes, I'm going to send them in with 0 fighter escort. And for some reason, 2 of the bombing missions do not go off. I'm not sure if it's user error or weather or something else. I don't know exactly how to check that. But the Minsk raid does. And unfortunately, I needed fighter escort. I think I went in on 6 days of the week, and he had 50 to 70 109s there on all days. The air superiority mission. I do bomb some of the rail yard, and I'm hopeful that the results from that are beneficial, but I do lose hundreds of bombers in this process. And they're mostly outdated bombers, so it's not something I'm too worried about. It's my first counter-strike of the war. I will get equipment back, and I'll get pilots back. I mean, I am Russia. But I'm curious to see how the results of the attack affects his supplies. Planning for the actual ground side of things, the southern front's a bit difficult. I'm mostly in retreat. I'm trying to control it. I have a minor river. I do have muddy terrain to work with. The ferry crossings I'm unfamiliar with. I've yet to battle there. I'm not expecting my opponent to fight there because he hasn't really chosen to fight in ground that at all benefits me thus far. And as I work my way up the front, not everything can be put behind the river line. I do have a few new rifle divisions, and they will prove to be valuable as I spread myself out through my defense. I do not have enough men here to have any sort of layered defense. It's going to be a single line. So I try to put my strongest units to the front of the echelon position. Mechanized division with a strength of 4 that I do not expect to see really any combat this turn. If anything, he's going to take out the 2 tank divisions to the north and the south of it and cut it off to where I never get to ever see it again, which has been the MO so far these first few weeks. So far, the Kiev front has remained a very similar, predictable story. He strikes my right flank. I adjust my lines to counter his strike, and then he strikes the new right flank that I present. I don't expect that to change in the upcoming turns. I'm just hoping I actually get some ability to counter-strike at some point in time here. The Gamel region is very similar to the southern front. It's a controlled retreat. I'm still trying to offer a bit of resistance. I'm also still worried that these units are meant for a flanking movement towards Kiev, and if that's the case, I need to prevent that from happening for at least as long as possible. The Smolensk area this turn is mostly just a reshuffling of my lines. I obviously have 3 divisions cut off, which or 4 divisions actually, and they're doing their job. That's the whole point. So I maneuver things around. I'm still expecting the bulk of his attack to come south of Dnieper, where the terrain's open and clear. But if he wants to go for the land bridge, I have some decent units there to prevent that. Where I'm not expecting his attack to come from is to the west of Smolensk in the mountain and forest regions. I just don't see enough there with high maneuverability skill to actually cut off my troops. Plus, I think all of his panzer divisions that are free or up north near going towards Leningrad. Since conquering the Lake of Omen, his progress here has slowed down. I'm not sure if his supplies are able to reach up this far north this early in the campaign, so I'm hoping that's the reason why. But what I am able to do is move some of my new units in the way, build a few fortification units, and kind of shift my position around. And we'll see what happens. But as I look at the situation at the end of the turn, I'm in a decent position, albeit a few miles closer towards Moscow. I do have a tank division that he allowed to get behind his lines. I'm only hopeful that he doesn't have too many rear echelon units, because if I'm able to do anything that obstructs his logistics system, I think that'll prove its weight in gold. Hence why I bombed Minsk at the beginning of this turn at the cost of 500 plus bombers. Other than that though, I'm looking forward to next turn. I get 2 new army fronts or army. It's going to help my command structure out, whatever the terminology is for them. I bring in a lot of rifle divisions. I spent my command points on replacing a general in the Smolensk region, hoping that helps me hold it. But we shall see. I'm going to send the turn over to my opponent and anxiously await to come back towards me.